Hello there. Today we're going to be talking about how to integrate the research material that you find into your writing projects using quotations, paraphrases, and summaries. There's a lot to talk about, so let's dive in. So you've done your research. You found a perfect source that illustrates the points that you want to make in your paper. How do you incorporate that material into your paper effectively? One way to use the material that you found through your research is to directly quote from it. Quotations should be used sparingly, but there are times where the author that you're getting your information from has really just said it best. You'll want to use quotes when rephrasing the material would lose impact or meaning. Iconic quotations from famous sources are a really good example of this. Think of famous movie lines. May the force be with you. I'll be back. To be or not to be, that is the question. Each example is short, which you will often want your quotes to be, and incorporating quotes changes the tone and voice of your paper because the words being used aren't yours. By the same token, though, changing the wording of the quotation changes its voice as well. If you want the quote to be recognizable, if you want your source to be instantly recognizable, using the original wording is often better. When you want your own voice to come forth, changing the wording and paraphrasing something is often better. However, why use quotes at all? Using quotations means that you can bring the authority of the material being quoted into your own paper. You're pointing out to your reader that your claim is supported by experts in your field and demonstrating that you've done your research. What happens when you find material that you want to reference but don't necessarily want to import exactly as it appears with the same wording? In that case, you'll want to use a paraphrase instead of a quote. When you paraphrase material, you rephrase the information presented by your source into your own words. Imagine that you're explaining the passage that you want to paraphrase to a friend. How would you phrase it? What would you say? Paraphrasing a source is usually better than quoting the material directly. Paraphrases allow you to change the audience. The material that you're using is likely aimed at a different audience than the one that you have in mind, and might be making a different claim from the one that you're building in your own work. Paraphrasing allows you to take the idea that your source is working with and connect it more directly to the goals of your paper and the audience that you're writing for. You can also combine a paraphrase and a quotation in the same passage, as we've done in this example. Material in green is paraphrased, while material in red is quoted. Do you see how we've introduced the author of the original source and explained why the reader should trust the information that we've gathered from them? Building up the credibility of your sources helps to establish your own authority and credibility as you present your argument and support your claims in your research. Lastly, you can instead present a summary in place of a quotation or a paraphrase. This is particularly useful when it would be hard to pin down a specific piece of a larger work that is making the point that you want to emphasize because the whole work is about that topic. You'll want to approach this much like a paraphrase, providing a short blurb that describes the source from the perspective of its connections to the point that you're making in your own work. So you've found material that you'd like to use. What next? A quote or a paraphrase can't stand on its own. You'll need to introduce the material into your writing with some scaffolding. First, you'll want to introduce the author of the quoted material. Why should your reader believe what the quoted author has to say in the first place? Setting up their authority with a brief description of who they are will make your quote more impactful. Next, you'll need to include your in-text citation after the quoted material to avoid plagiarism. Remember, any quote, any paraphrase, or any summarized ideas from any source that you've used needs to be cited in order to avoid plagiarism. An introduction and a citation will establish the quote as a valuable piece of information that your reader will pay attention to. Now that you have your reader's attention, it's an excellent time to incorporate the what and the so what statements that connect the quoted material into your broader claim. First, you'll want to emphasize what the quote demonstrates. You know exactly what the quote means to you because this is your research project. Your audience does not. Connect the dots for them. What are they supposed to be getting out of the quote? Next, you'll want to emphasize why the point that you're making is important in the first place. What are the implications of the information that you've just provided? Always be sure that you're painting a clear picture and connecting the resources that you've gathered. You'll want to guide your reader clearly and concisely through the material that you've gathered to persuade them to accept the claims that you're advancing in your research. Just reporting what your sources have said is not enough. Doing so leaves the connections vague and mostly just in your own head as the researcher. Compare this example to this one. See the difference? In this example, words like by contrast, nevertheless, and therefore draw a roadmap for your reader to connect the things that you're arguing, the sources that you've gathered, and how these fit together. And that's it. You should now feel more confident in your ability to incorporate the materials that you find in your research into your writing projects. Feel free to browse the other videos in our collection to improve your research skills even more.